Shalom, when the self souls by giving no praise to Yahweh, but Hashem, Yahushua, Bushem, Kakadash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone, and honors to you brothers doing the work of the Most High in truth and in sincerity. Yahweh's real name, with whom the world ignorantly calls God, Jehovah or Yahweh. His real name is Yahweh. Son's true name is Yahushua, and when we pray Yahweh, Ba Hashem, Yahushua, meaning in, Hamin in the, and Sham, meaning name. Salakia. Right. So I mean, there's just something I've just been observing, the amount of different ceasefires that are supposedly happening, at the moment, right? Pushing this spirit of peace and safety within the world, right? But we understand that ultimately, right? Well, I mean, there are several things, right? Ultimately, there is going to be, the war to end all wars, literally, right? But then also that this isn't really the wars that we're really caring about, right? So let's grab a few things real quick. Just load that up. All right, this is I always forget if it's 2 and 9, 3 and 9. Yes, 3 and 9, right? So let's start off with this one, right? Just because I made that point. It's Joel 3:9. It says, "Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles: Prepare war, wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong." Because this is going into the first bit, is really going into like diverting funds from like agriculture and stuff like that to war, right? Let me just see if I can pull it up in the news real quick, right? Because on the other hand, right, whereas you're also seeing lots of these different nations talking about, oh wait, no, that's the wrong link that I wanted. Sorry, no idea what happened there. Salakia. I'm just trying to find, because you get certain of these news sites that just kind of these some of these news sites. BBC One looks okay. All right, let me bring that one in. It's like that was the wrong article, right? So on one hand, you're seeing all of these different mentions of ceasefires, right, in some of these long running campaigns. But on the other hand, as we've just read here, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears, i.e. that diversion from agriculture and other things to basically spending for the military, right? Let me see if I can also bring this up as well. So even this, see, now I'm gonna, this is from 2 weeks ago. Okay, this is Guardian and don't, because a lot of these news sites nowadays like to have what do you call this thing, like to have paywalls, right? So even you then also see this watershed moment: EU leaders agree plan for huge rise in defense spending, right? So that was just the point. Just the headline's good enough. So even this just came through today: Germany votes for historic boost to defense spending, right? So that's the point, right? So we understand that this is something that's going to be happening. We're going to be seeing more and more nations spending more and more on their militaries, right? It says, "Assemble yourselves," Joel 3:11 now. Sorry, let me finish off breaking down Joel 3:10. Right, it says, "Let the weak say I'm strong." Right, so you have nations that were formerly weak, that through this intervention is not the right word, but through this basically increase spending into the military, right, and then also work on the weapon, right, they too are quote unquote strong. Okay. So carrying on, verse 11 says, "Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Yahweh." Right? "Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Yahweh Shaphat," right? And Yahweh Shaphat meaning Yahweh's judgment, right? Yahweh and Shaphat. Okay, so for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about, right? And that's referring to that Middle East region. Okay, so yeah, we do see these different peace deals and stuff like that. We do understand that this ultimately, this isn't what we're looking for, right? We can also grab this, right? This is Jeremiah 49 and 20. It says, therefore, hear the counsel of Yahweh that he hath taken against Edom, and his purposes that he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Right, referring to this Edomite, right? He's the least of the flock, right? As Salakia, this Amalekite, Salakia, I misspoke there, right? Referring to this Amalekite, those individuals over there in our land, right? Because they also were in a ceasefire, which they have just broken yesterday, right? And then they, woke up this morning saying, or yesterday, saying that, just basically deaded off like 300-400 people, man, right? So yeah, so they've come from a ceasefire. So that there were basically 4 ceasefires kind of in progress all at the same time, but one's already done, right? And then this one is a partial ceasefire, right? This one was kind of out of the blue, so it'll be interesting to see how this basically how this affects that region, okay? Because that is this is an interesting one here in terms of geopolitics, right? And then this other one, which also goes to show you that there are basically things happening in the world, right? Wars and rumors of wars that people basically are just so used to, they don't even make news, right? So let me continue on here. It's Joel 3 and 13. I put you in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of Yahweh is near in the valley of decision. Right? So once again, we understand that none of these are the wars that we're paying attention to. Right? Let's grab that. This is Matthew 6 and where is it? Wars and rumors of wars? Am I bugging out? I'm bugging out. Slovakia. Let me find it. The 24. Yeah, I had it the wrong way around. Slovakia. Right. It says Matthew 24 and 6 is, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Right, so we're seeing all these different wars, rumors of wars, and we're now also seeing the so-called peace treaties that are being signed, right? Trying to make this Trump character look like he's some kind of great savior, right? But we understand that this isn't the war that we're looking forward to, as we read. Right, so let's grab this. Is First Thessalonians 5 from the top. So, but of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. But yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. Okay, so the Lord has left signs, right, crumbs, if you will, such that we can keep an eye out on roughly how long we have left until the Lord comes back. To 2 Ezra 9 from the top. He answered me then and said, measure thou the time diligently in itself, and when thou seest part of the signs pass, which I've told thee before, right? So in fact, even from here, let's grab this in Sirach. This is Sirach 39 from the top, right? It says, but he that giveth his mind to the law of the Most High, and is occupied in the meditation thereof, will seek out the wisdom of all the ancient, and be occupied in prophecy. Right? And how would they be occupied in prophecies? Mark 13 and 33. It says, take ye heed, watch and pray, for you know not when the time is. Right? And then that then allows us to do this, right, in 2 Ezra 9, which is to measure the time diligently, to be occupied in prophecy, to be watching, right, and to be praying, right? And then it says, when thou seest part of the signs pass. So basically, when you're seeing prophecy unfold, right, verse 2, it says, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made, right? So although we don't know exactly when the Lord is coming back, right, the Lord has left signs for us to look to look for, all right? And one of the signs is that there would be peace. There's talk of peace and safety, Right, it's 1 Thessalonians 5:3. Now it says, "For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." Okay, so there's no escaping. If you ain't of the elect, man, in the land of America, right, there ain't gonna be no escape from this destruction, right? Because the elect are gonna have to be physically extracted from that land, and anyone that remains is gonna be, is gonna be completely destroyed, right? So regardless of what is being seen throughout the world, this world is heading for destruction, right? Because of because of great wickedness, because of all the the nasty things that happen. The Lord is bringing those nukes to cleanse the earth. Okay. Um. Yeah, we'll see if anything else comes to mind. But yeah, I mean, once again, this is going to be an interesting one to observe. You know, having grown up around so-called Kurds, and some so-called Turks as well. When I was young, this was kind of a story that you'd always kind of hear, right? Something once again that's just in the background just happening, okay, right? But once again, we're just looking forward to that ultimate, destruction, right? Wherein the Lord is gonna put the Spirit, right, on whoever the leader of Russia is at that time, right, to shoot them nukes, right? We can go into that. This is Ezekiel 38 from the top. It says, "And the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, right? And say, Thus saith the Lord power, I am against thee, O Gog," right? And why does it keep saying I'm against? Because they're Edomites, right? The Lord isn't for the Edomites. The Lord is for the Israelites. In fact, the Lord ain't for any of the other heathen nations. Right, we can grab that real quick as well. It says Isaiah 40 and 15. Right, "Behold, the nations are as a drop of a bucket, and are counted as the small dust of the balance. Behold, he taketh up the isles as a very little thing." So when you look at these different heathen nations, right, the Lord's basically saying they're nothing, right? But yet, the Lord has allowed them this period to be over us, right, as part of our punishment, right? So basically, the Lord ain't back in Ezekiel 38. The Lord ain't with these Russians because they're still Edomites, right? But the Lord is going to use them. So it says, and thus saith thus saith the Lord power, behold, I'm against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. It says, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. So basically, going back into that kind of Soviet era mentality, the Lord was going to spin them, from that so-called pacifist mentality, and flip them back into kind of what you're seeing right now. It says, "And I'll bring thee forth, right, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them," right, and Persia being Iran, and Russia and Iran have a thing going on, right? It says, and Libya with them. It says, all of them with shield and helmet. Goma, right, which is Turkey, right? And so once again, you're also kind of seeing, this kind of region as well, talking, potentially about, some kind of peace, right? All of these things are interesting, or, interesting to observe, right? It says Goma and all his bands, and even as I was putting reading this right now, right, the apostles will, I'm just thinking about, the apostles will have seen this chapter more or less unfold, right? Because they would have seen Russia in that more peace style state, right? And then they're slowly but surely turning into that state of what you're seeing today, right, in 2014, right, even the whole thing with Georgia, right, which I'm not too particularly familiar with, right, but you had the whole thing with Georgia, then 2014 with Ukraine, and then recently with Ukraine. But the Lord is going to keep putting that spirit in them, right, to foster. Right, foster, is that the word? I don't know if that's the word I want, but it's basically push towards this war. Okay, obviously we're waiting for the other prophecies to come to pass, but when the Lord gives that okay, right, they're going to push that button as we're about to read. So it says, Goma and all his bands, right? Oh, and this is what Turkey, right? There was a period of time when Turkey was very much America aligned, right? But within even the short time I've been in this, right? We've seen Turkey, make that switch, and Turkey, kind of likes playing the fence, right? They like playing the fence, but which is why they're kind of a thorn in America's side, because they're strategically useful, right? But they're annoying, right? It says the house of Togama and of the North Quarters and all his bands and many people with thee, right? Be thou prepared and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Which is why you're seeing once again something else that it has been witnessed, right, of this particular chapter coming to pass, right, which is Russia giving out their different defensive weaponries to these different nations, being a guard unto them, right, protecting them, right. Once again, Russia at least tried to sell the S-400 system to Turkey, right, and I'm pretty sure they did the same for Iran as well. Okay, so verse 8 says, and after many days shalt thou be visited, in the latter days thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many people, against the mountains of Israel, which have been always waste, but is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. Right? You brought back from the sword, America's never been touched. Right? Against the mountains of Israel, the region of Israel shall dwell safely, meaning the Israelites will eventually inhabit the land of Israel, in peace. Okay, which is what we're looking forward to, right? So it says, thou shalt ascend and come like a storm, thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land, thou and all thy bands and many people with thee, right? The different military men when referring to those bands, right? In verse 10, point I want, it says, thus saith the Lord, power shall come to pass, shall also come to pass, that at the same time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought, right? Which is to basically press that button, right? They are going to press that button, right? This is Jeremiah 50. Let's start from verse 9, right? It says, for lo, I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon an assembly of great nations, right, from the north country, and they shall set themselves in array against her, right? From thence she shall be taken. Their arrows shall be as of a mighty expert man, none shall return in vain, right? And when it's referring, to the north country in this kind of context, that's referring to rather when the scriptures reference the north country in this kind of context, is referring to Russia, right? Because Russia is going to be is the geographically north nation, right, that is going to be a spearhead in taking in basically shooting missiles at America. Verse 10 says, and Chaldea shall be a spoil, right? All that spoil her shall be satisfied, saith Yahweh, because you were glad, because you rejoiced, O ye destroyers of mine heritage, because you are grown fat as the heifer at grass, and bellow as bulls. Your mother shall be sore confounded, which is referring to England, right? Because America came out of England. She that bare you shall be ashamed. Behold, the hindermost of the nation shall be a wilderness, a dry land, and a desert. Because the wrath of Yahweh, it shall not be inhabited, but it shall be wholly desolate. Everyone that goeth by Babylon shall be astonished, and hiss at all her plagues. Right? So America, when it's destroyed, is never going to be inhabited again. Thus saith Yahweh. Right? And there's nothing, that can be done about that. That's just the will of the Lord. It says, put your yourselves in array against Babylon, round about, all ye that bend the bow, shoot at her, spare no arrows, for she hath sinned against Yahweh. Right, and this is the war that we're looking forward to. This is, when we're, like I said, when we're seeing all of these different ceasefires that are being declared, in the world, right? Ultimately, we understand that those really aren't the wars to be paying attention to. The elder touched on that, at the camp, the week gone, right? So yeah, that's certainly something to always keep in mind, right? We're waiting for this last major war, right? Because after that there'll be war no more, right? We'll end on that, because you have people trying to complain, trying to say that there's a problem with us. So it's like, no, it's a problem with this Edomite man, with this system, because in the kingdom, right, things are going to be blessed, right? This is Romans 8 and 19. It says, for the earnest expectation of the creature, which creature just means thing created, waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of the Most High. Right? So creation is waiting for the children of Israel. Right? Because in the kingdom of Israel is going to be peace. Right? As Isaiah 2 from the top says, the word that Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of Yahweh's house shall be established in the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills. Right? Which, the mountain, right, and the hills, mountains referring to governments, right, and hills referring to smaller governments. It says, and all nations shall flow unto it. And many people shall go and say, come ye, and let us go up unto the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his path. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem, because they're going to be seeing just how, how we're going to be shining, right, with righteousness, right? They're going to see how our way is superior, okay, and they're going to want to try and partake. Right, it says, verse 4 says, and he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people, and shall beat their plowshares into their swords into plowshares. So it's the reverse of what we read in Joel the 2nd chapter. Right, it says, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Right, so that's the only time when there's going to be ceasefire. Right, it's going to be in the kingdom of heaven, man. Kingdom of Israel, kingdom of Yahweh Shai. Alright, so as always, Lord, I was edifying. Till next time we say, Shalom.